The Lord be with you. Hello, friends. I am so excited to be together with you on this journey in this class to learn about preaching and also worship. And I expect you have some feelings of excitement about the class and about the beginning of the school year, and perhaps also some anxieties. That's perfectly natural. And I want to do what I can to ease any anxieties that you have. So I want to tell you a little bit about my approach to the course right here at the outset. There are two schools of thought about preaching, about teaching preaching. And the one is the imitation school. It says, well, here's how I preach. So be like me. Here's how I do exegesis. Here's how I prepare a manuscript or preach without notes, or here's what I do, so be like me. And the other school of thought says, well, let's actually break preaching down into its component parts and try to learn each little one as we can, and then pull them all together. The truth is that both of these are valuable, and we'll do a little bit of each in this particular class. But what's important to me is that you learn to preach like you, in the particular way and voice that you have been called. Of course, we'll try to discern together what makes for good preaching, and we'll try to find common ground there, but we won't have a simple, single, one-size-fits-all approach. Preaching, like the gospel or the blues, is caught as much as it is taught. And it's a complex, social meaning-laden activity that has a number of working parts that together synthesize a number of very specific skills that all work together. So it's a lot actually like learning how to play an instrument. And so one of my approaches in teaching preaching is to think about it like learning how to play an instrument. Now, that involves a couple of things. I actually sort of modeled some of the approaches that we'll use in the course on Suzuki. I have a Suzuki kid myself who grew up playing the violin, and we will sometimes be doing Suzuki-like exercises. And it may seem sometimes like those exercises are it may feel like they're busy work, but they aren't. They are getting a muscle memory, or for the case of us, not so much muscle memory, but exercises in exegesis and in focus and in illustration and in rhetoric, exercises that you probably will want to return to repeatedly in your preaching life, but we'll probably just hit them once or twice or three times here in this particular class. The Suzuki model has a handful of characteristics, and one is an environment of high expectation and trust, and I hope that we will build that together in the class. Another is frequent exposure to really good examples of, in this case, preaching. A third is identifying these various parts and then repeating them, as I've said. And then finally, engaging in action and reflection model of education, which is what we're going to be doing again and again and again the whole class long. Let's talk for just a minute about calling. Some of you have a pretty clear idea that you are being called to every week pulpit preaching in some congregation somewhere. Some of you have no idea whether that's going to be a part of your calling. You suspect perhaps not, but then you never know. But here's the thing, that's all perfectly fine. Of course, what we'll learn in this class will be of use to someone who is going to be a regular weekly pulpit preacher. But it's also going to be of use to every one of us who is called by virtue of our baptisms to do the same thing that pulpit preachers do, to bring the Bible and our real lives into conversation, to fulfill the Great Commission to make disciples, to speak the word, especially a good gospel word, to a world that desperately needs it. A word about distance learning. You're all adult learners, and though I expect you know this already, it's worth repeating that we may have been socialized and brought up in our undergraduate years and certainly in our pre-collegiate years to think that sort of the magic in teaching happens in the classroom. And there certainly is some magic that happens when we all gather together at the intensive. But in truth, for distance learning, the real magic happens when you give careful and close and thoughtful attention to the readings and to the assignments. And so I want to encourage you to give your very best attention to those things and to the work that we engage in online, because that's really where the magic happens in distance learning. Finally, as you review the syllabus, you'll note that we're employing this year a rather unusual grading system. It's our conviction that students learn best, and they're better able to handle the competing pressures and stresses of work life and church life and school life and family life and everything else when there isn't a competitive system for grades. So you'll see that our grading philosophy, if you look in the section on that in the syllabus, reflects that conviction. And if you have any questions, for example, about how the Treasury of Merit works, please feel free to ask either Professor Rosaboom or myself. One last word. There are some graduate schools and graduate programs that assume a sort of a thirds division in the class makeup. That is to say that a third of you will be really, really fine preachers, and a third meh, and then another third somewhere in the middle. And I want to tell you, I just don't believe that that's at all true. I think that every one of you has the capacity to be a really fine preacher. It will take hard work, and so we'll do hard work in this class, but we do it out of a sense of gratitude. It's our being faithful to our calling, and so we offer that work prayerfully, knowing that the real work of preaching is done by the power of the Holy Spirit somewhere between our lips and our congregation's ears. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to send an email to either Professor Rosaboom or myself. Go with God.